So let's talk about Pluribus, Apple's new hit TV series starring Rhea Seehorn by Vince Gilligan from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. This show has really been making some noise and has already been picked up for a second season. I'm sure you've all seen it by now, but if you haven't, go check that out because we're going to be covering the characters, the esoteric symbolism, and the historical references that tie into the narrative, and the heavy philosophical soup cast upon the screen. But before we do that, thank you all for watching, and if you're new to Real Enigmas and Theories, welcome. This video will contain spoilers for Pluribus Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2. So without further ado, let's cook. Now, if you're here, that means you've most likely watched the show, so no need for a recap. Let's just dive in. First, let's talk about the Hive mind. And from now on, I'm gonna call them the Joined. A virtual Fed ad, Davis Taffer USDA, broke it down perfectly on what happened. And we saw all of what he said along with a few other details. He filled in the blanks for us, but he left out the actual story of how everything spread, which is, in my opinion, key to understanding the Join. Wait a minute, is that Jack Abbott from Young and the Restless? Oh snap. We know that the first humans who became infected were doctors and military personnel. And we also know that these so-called well-intentioned beings use non-consensual means to spread the virus. That's a red flag. And I wouldn't trust anybody who would lick some damn donuts and put them shits back. Another red flag. They claim that they cannot cause harm to others, but being that they started out with doctors and military personnel, they had to know that dusting the entire world with the contagion that causes seizures while hundreds of millions of people are operating planes, trains, automobiles, and heavy machinery would cause harm and death. Then when Zosha was telling the story, she said that no one died in the beginning, but the government became aware of them, and to prevent any more bloodshed, they had to accelerate the non-consensual process of infection. So if no one died at first, what bloodshed was she talking about then? Also, the president and several high-ranking officials died, which spells out to me that they were murdered, because if you could just scream bad will at them and they're affected by your emotions, then the war would have been short-lived and we could all go home. This means that they would have had to make an offensive assault on high-ranking officials after being discovered. And this also means that the Joined are liars. She straight up said that no one died in the beginning, but there was bloodshed that needed to be stopped. And being that they started off with doctors and military police personnel, I think they could have thought of a better way. Now, speaking of causing harms to others, it seems that some people don't take well to the joining process and they die anyway. I'm not sure if Helen died from falling backwards on and hitting her head or anything, but she did become one of the Joined before passing, and we know this because of the information that they have about her and the smile that she gave Carol just before dying. But I don't know if her injuries were big enough to cause her death, because notice Helen's black eyes. Now, they made a point to show people picking up the dead in Carol and Helen's neighborhood as well when somebody came through with that landscaping truck. And it appears that many died from accidents caused by the seizures, but it's clear that some of the people just don't make it through the joining process. And again, if they started off with the very doctors that were working on the virus, then surely they could have figured out a way to identify those individuals who wouldn't make it through the process. But I think they just made a decision to go ahead and kill them off, because what happened to informed consent? They have a lab-created RNA that's killing some of the recipients. I believe that they knew some of them wouldn't survive the process and they just decided to kill them. And even larger than that, I think that the people are dead, and that's what we're seeing happening with those seizures. The body is just taking its course. Then you have this RNA that hijacks the body's systems, memories, and everything else. So then you have these harmful words that can be directed at them. The RNA reboots to process the negativity and leaves some of the bodies back in its natural state, which is actually dead. Now, I think that they knew that some of the people just wouldn't survive the process, but they also knew that some of the people would be immune to the RNA. And that's why they had that little handy animation ready to show the survivors. I mean, he had the animation ready complete with a live voiceover while he was speaking to Carol. Makes no sense. Now, during his whole spiel, he says that the agent acts as a psychic glue that binds all of their minds together, along with all of their thoughts, experiences, skills, and talents. This reminds me of the Akashic record, which is an ethereal library containing the total history of every soul. And this concept is found across all culture. In Christianity, you get the Book of Life mentioned in Revelation. You have the Tablets of Destiny by Thoth, or the Hall of Ma'at in Egyptian mysticism. You have the Sefer HaKaim in Kabbalah. And this concept was used to create the internet or the cloud. The concept comes from Hindu philosophy and yogic tradition. Akasha is one of the 5 great spiritual elements that holds memory and vibration. Now, all of this kind of puts me in the mind of Lakshmi and her family. She's the one who has the most family members around her that have been joined. Currently, she has her husband, her mother, and son, but she also had her grandfather who was killed when Carol snapped out and made all of the join freeze. Now, I'm not gonna lie. At first, I thought Lakshmi was being rude when she didn't offer her hand to greet Carol, but notice the bandage on her forehead. And then think about how Carol caused the accident that killed her grandfather and injured her. After they buried Helen, Carol asked Zosha if any of the unjoined were injured, and she said nothing major. That nothing major was Lakshmi's forehead. But I gotta keep it a beanbag with you. I feel like she was delusional, because if she thinks that's her son, husband, and mother, what happens if somebody comes to attack her? You know, your life is your own, so your husband, mother, or son wouldn't be coming to save you. They'd just rush to come pick your body up off the ground after it happened. Anyway, her having those 4 immediate family members and losing the grandfather makes me think of the Hindu grandfather deity named Brahma, known as Pitamaha, which literally means grandfather. He has 4 faces like she had 4 relatives. And Brahma is the programmer who represents the mind of God that imprints the initial thought forms into the Akashic record. Now, the concept of the joined and all sharing one mind is akin to a human consciousness grid that connects every individual mind to a collective awareness. This actually exists and is also demonstrated in the synchronized movements of the joined. And that psychic glue, as he called it, is not the actual cloud itself. I think that this virus is just giving them access to something that was already there, because the human consciousness grid was already there, just like the Akashic records and other concepts like it across cultures. I think the big question is that mouse out there infecting other mice, and are the joined also connected to that mouse, since technically he was the first to be infected? Moreover, what else is that hive mind connected to? Now let's talk about Carol and Helen and Zosha and Roban. Right away, when I saw Helen smile at Carol, I knew she'd been joined for a few seconds. It was confirmed when those neighbors' kids knew about that spare key. But what really drove it home was Zosha being chosen to accompany Carol based on her looking like the actual OG Roban character, because that was something that only Carol and Helen knew. I mean, she does kind of look like dude, and we're not talking about no Aerosmith song either. Her description was taken from a book, but I don't think that it was Carol's book, because a female version doesn't even exist. She buried it. I think Zosha comes from another book. What if Zosha is the merchant's daughter and the desert girl Fatima from Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist? Both girls were love interests of Santiago. Fatima is the receptive feminine that anchors the seeker's journey, and the merchant's daughter symbolizes comfort and makes him familiar with his original surroundings. And I know you probably think that I'm just pulling this out of nowhere, but it's actually embedded in the show pretty deeply. First off, Zosha is selected by the join to serve the same archetypal structure as both girls in The Alchemist. The merchant's daughter is described as having raven black hair, bright eyes, and a smile that could reveal the world's treasures. And Fatima would have fit the same general Mediterranean North African phenotype. Santiago said that her eyes were brown and they spoke the language of the soul, and Zosha was able to speak all languages. Now, I know you probably saying, how cool, you read The Alchemist, whoop-de-doo. Nah, it's not that simple. When we first see Zosha, she's in Bukalef, which is part of Tangier in Morocco. Then she later takes Carol to Bilbao, Spain. She pretty much does Santiago's trip backwards. Santiago starts in Spain and then goes to Tangier in Morocco. Why are the locations from The Alchemist popping up in this show? She also fits the description of both characters, the merchant's daughter and Fatima. And by the way, Carol also showed us that she too speaks multiple language. Of course, she had a few French words in her book when she was reading it to her fans, but when Kuma was speaking with Zosha for the first time, Carol was listening and knew exactly what he was saying, and she even answered. I have to say that I was surprised to spot this connection, but then I thought about how Carol is always drinking, and that is made from an alchemical process of distilled liquor, along with all the rebirthing symbolism in this one too. First, we see the guy who discovered the signal tossing the football with his buddy when he realizes what that sequence means. He comes to that realization as he's holding the ball, which represents the Vesica Pisces. Kumba, or Casanova McBoner, also brings up the nuclear football while he's styling on Air Force One. Then you have Helen bringing up Finnegan's Wake, which is another multilingual book. And it has a character that's named Anna Livia Plurabel, who's the mother of 28 children, representing the 28 lunar cycle and the human female menstrual cycle. Plurabel, Pluribus. Let's talk about the RNA created in the lab and how it became the virus, and the countdown with meta connections to hundreds of millions dead at the birth of a one world government. That countdown, starting at the precision of 439 days, 19 hours, 56 minutes, and 11 seconds, is too specific to just ignore. Because I know that writers usually hide multi-layered codes like this, and in most cases is where the meta portion of the spell is cast. That sequence of numbers is reduced to 3, and I notice a lot of 3s showing up everywhere too. You had those 3 boxes of donuts, the shot of 3 satellites, there was a shot of 3 windows, you had 3 stacks of Petri dishes, and they were lining them out in multiples of 3, 9, and 6. And check this shit out. If we start at the date November 7th, 2025, when Pluribus was released, and we go through the countdown, you get January 20th, 2027, sometime around 7:56 p.m. or 7:11, which is the exact middle point of Trump's second term. And that's funny because he's referred to as the father of the mRNA jab, which is written in that same genetic alphabet, GUAC, guanine, uracil, adenine, and cytosine. And then you got him throwing ice up in there real quick. Yo, let me switch up speeds real quick before they come for my channel. So let's get this straight. The government was actively working on this thing, and all high levels of government passed away while billions of people were doing the Harlem Shake, right? And you know it smelled like straight ass breath and tater chips up in this room right here. Ain't no way around that. I noticed a couple severance connections in there as well, with the people actually being severed from their consciousness. And also Carol even says the phrase right as rain, like Mark does during Helly's orientation. We could have talked about all the 11 and 7 nods. Kumba and the harem symbolism was interesting as well, and we'll probably get to that in other episodes. And like I asked before, is the hive mind linked to anything else? That mouse, or is there something mechanical? What's going on? Yo, peep right here how Carol was giving herself a sobriety test. And if you're a homesteader, you and I both know how dope it was to see a mini excavator get airlifted to somebody's crib. Somebody needs to make that a service ASAP. It kind of reminds me of the time that old lady was airlifted out and got spun around 1,000 times. Anyway, drop down in the comments And let me know your thoughts on Carol's position opposed to the other unjoined people. Do you think this is a good thing or do you think this is a bad thing? And what would you do if you were in her situation? Would you want to remain autonomous or would you want to join the hive mind? So there you have it. Some esoteric gumbo, history, and some hidden meaning for the win. And if you like this video and you want to see my channel grow, tap that like and hype this video. It really helps the channel and it's free. And share this video and drop down in the comments and let us know your thoughts. And if you're not subscribed, hopefully this will be the video that'll make you do it. That's all for my video this evening. I'll catch you in the next one.